Let's talk Mandalorian helmets. Me and Darth Rage are having a little bit of a contest. We're both going to make a Mandalorian helmet. We're going to use two different methods and see what they look like, and we're going to give them both away. But I'm going to make a video here on how to make your own Mandalorian 3D printed helmet. Well, I should say not how to make a helmet, but how to finish a helmet. So let's take a look at some of the supplies we're going to use. The first section that I'm going to talk about is going to work for either method. And then I'm going to get into the differences of what me and Darth Rage are doing. So first is the helmet. Now, I printed my own. I have a Creality CR10. That's a big enough printer where you can print the helmet in one piece. Lots of different printers out on the market. If you get like an Ender 3 or something like that, you can do something like this. Just know that you're going to have to cut it into smaller little pieces in the slicing software and then glue it all together. It's possible, but just know on a CR10 you can print this whole thing one piece, no gluing together. So to do this is going to be probably one of my longer videos because I'm going to go through the whole process, but I just want to explain the different products I'm going to use and then show you how I use them. So we got this. Now if you don't have a 3D printer, I do recommend galacticarmory.com. You can get one of these raw 3D prints from them for a fraction of a cost of buying a 3D printer and PLA and printing and doing all that stuff, so check out Galactic Armory. But then the things we're going to need. First, I'm going to do a sanding on this raw plastic, and I'm probably going to use a really low grit sandpaper, maybe like a 60 or an 80 grit. So I would get these different kinds of sandpaper. So I have an assorted pack here. I see that this one comes with 80 grit, 150, 220. You're also going to want at least 400, if not higher. So what I'll do is I'm going to sand this with, say, 80. And I'm just going to knock it down as best I can. And then I'm going to apply Bondo glazing spot putty. So this stuff's important because this stuff will lay down in between the layer lines and make everything nice and smooth. Once that's on the helmet, we're going to give it all another sand, probably at a 150, 120. And then I'm going to get into some primers. So let's take a look at these primers. I really wanted to just make this as simple as possible. You can just go get these cans at O'Reilly's or on the internet or something like that. I really like this Duplicolor red filler, and then the sandable black, and then this 1K clear coat on top of it. And what this does is, so we'll do the filler and we'll sand it again, probably a 220, and then we'll do the black sandable on top of the red, and then I'll probably do a 400, maybe a 600, and then I'll give it one more shot of the black so that everything's nice and coated, and then I'll do the 1K, and that's going to make this nice and crystal clear glossy black, like a jet black on here. Whole idea is to get this to an ultra smooth surface with a jet black, glossy black finish. Once you're there, then we can start trying to make this thing metallic, and that's where we get into the differences. So, two different ways that me and Darth Rage are going to do this is he's going to use the, the graphite powder method. Graphite powder method is this, if you want to take a close-up shot of this, this is a powder, and it gets everywhere. But what we'll do is you put that on the shiny black surface and you just buff it off. You put it on and then you try to take it off. And what will be left is a really reflective, shiny surface. The other way to do this is with some type of paint, like Alumoluster, or what I'm using is Duralumin. So this needs to be done through an airbrush, which I have and I plan to do, so that's going to be the difference between me and Darth Rage. But if you don't have an airbrush, if you don't want to go spend $100 on something like that, $15 on Amazon, this works, I'm going to say almost just as good, but we'll see the finished product when me and Darth Rage both do them, see which one looks better. I'm banking, I'm putting all my money on the Duralumin. I think it's going to look awesome, but yeah, so that's how we're going to make our Mandalorian helmet. So here we go, let's get started. All right, so like I said, we're gonna start by just sanding on the raw plastic, and I'd normally start with a 60 or an 80 grit, but I'm gonna cut a corner here, and I'm gonna go ahead and use this mouse sander. So this is, let's see, I'm using a 120 grit just because that's all I had. I ran out of my 60 grit, but that's okay. We're just trying to knock down some of these layer lines just a little bit. Like you can see up at the very top here, you can really start to see the change in layers. Camera might not pick it up so good, but anyway, we're just gonna kind of go around the whole helmet once with this. Nothing too crazy. We're not trying to cut it too deep or anything, just trying to knock down a couple of those lines just a little bit before we get into any of the fillers. I have done some rough sanding on the plastic here on the top, and now my printer's printing really good, so I don't really have too many layer line issues on the sides. It was really just the top where, you know, you can really see the steps and the layers. I might give it just a quick hit with the power sander here on the sides, but I don't think it really needs it. I think the filler is going to be enough. But so, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and take some of my 80 grit and just kind of go over the whole helmet once, and then we'll get into filler. Now, these sanding blocks, I don't know, they're okay. I've used them. I just feel like you really lose the grit in the sandpaper too fast with these, but they can be used as just a nice, you know, sponge to hold your sandpaper with. I also use these SOS pads sometimes, and it just gives you, you know, something to hang on to better when you sand on something. But let's just go ahead and give this once over with the 80 grit. DJ Blues Bro, scratching some records here. Now, if there's one thing that I have learned the hard way one too many times, it's that helmets without visors in them are fragile. So be mindful of that. In fact, I've considered even putting in like an old cruddy visor or something in here just so that there's like something holding this together. I know some 3D files even have a little visor backer like that will go over it and connect these two sides, but this is fragile, right? This can crack, and when you're sanding, you just gotta really be mindful of that, because I can't tell you how many times I've been holding one side sanding on the other and it just snaps on me, and it really will ruin your day, trust me. So yeah, you might want to put something back there, just, or, you know, hold it when you're sanding them together so that you're not bending and putting too much pressure on the print. Okay, so we did a little bit of the mouse sander. I did the whole helmet with an 80 grit, and I normally don't take this step, but I'm gonna go ahead and go over the helmet one more time with 150 grit, just for the heck of it, to make it just that much better before I put any filler or primer on this. So we'll do one more round, and then we'll get into some paint. And then, you know, one thing to keep in mind is there's this line of detail up here in the top of the helmet. So if I can get really close, I'll need to make sure that this line doesn't lose its detail. So after I'm done sanding and priming and filling and all that, I might take some needle files or something, just kind of go down that edge or anywhere that, you know, it might have lost some detail being built up with all the primers. So Anyway, just something to keep in mind is watch the detail on the helmet. If it starts to go away on you, then, you know, get a tool and bring that detail back before you take the next step. So you can see here, I got a sand in, or 2 sands in on the helmet now. Everything's nice and scuffed. You can see I do have a little bit of a very faint layer line right here, so I went just a little heavier there. It almost disappeared on this side. So, you know, what that is a small layer shift where this one line that printed just a little bit to that side. So this side I could knock down, and this side's a gap, so this side needs to be filled. And there is one more tiny little layer line down here, but layer shift, but very, very good print. You can barely even feel it. Once I put just a tiny bit of filler or Bondo on here, those layer shifts are going to be completely gone. But yep, so speaking of which, good time to I'm going to wash this all off, spray it down with just a little bit of alcohol so I know that I got all the water off. And then I'm going to put some Bondo on here, so let's do it. Okay, we are in the house. We're just going to give this a quick wash. I don't know, I guess you can probably use soap, but maybe just a tiny bit. All we're trying to do is just get the plastic dust off of this. Again, I don't think you need soap, but I feel like it just kind of helps the plastic dust collect together and then rinse off a little better. You also should wash your hands so that you're not just wiping grease on. If you have wax and grease remover, that's a good idea to use that too. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some alcohol. You can put this right on the print, but I have a spray gun here, so I'm just going to put it in there real quick. Alright, so I'm just going to give this a spray with some alcohol. And we'll take a paper towel, and we'll just wipe everything off. And there we go. And then the alcohol obviously helps the water evaporate off faster too. Okay, time to do our glazing spot putty. I've let the alcohol evaporate off this a little bit. Yeah, it feels mostly dry, so I'm going to go ahead and start putting just a layer of this all over the helmet. You can use, you know, some type of spreader or palette knife or something, but I really find just using your fingers works best, so I just throw on a couple of gloves and start wiping it all over the helmet. And you can see what this does. You can see a little bit of these layer lines right here, and just putting some Bondo over it will fill in those little gaps between the lines, and then when we sand it, it'll be nice and smooth, and hopefully we won't see any of those layer lines anymore. You don't have a lot of working time with this stuff. It does dry kind of quick, so just work in small patches. I might need to do this top part a couple of times, so if I can get the light just right, you might be able to see just a little bit of layer line still showing through the Bondo. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to Bondo it once, and then I'm going to take my needle file and go and fix that line just so that I'm not losing that detail. If you've really done your due diligence with, you know, sanding on the helmet prior to this step, you should be able to get away with a pretty light layer of this stuff, because you've already knocked down those layer lines, so there's not really a lot left. This is just for deeper stuff. And, you know, you saw the helmet before this step. Mine was looking really good, so I don't need a really thick layer of Bondo. I'm just trying to wipe it so that, you know, there's coverage everywhere, and just a light layer of it, and then we're pretty much going to sand it off again. While this stuff's still wet, I'm going to try to pick some of this out of this little crevice here. And I always seem to Bondo my fingers somehow, even though I put on 2 gloves. It always seems to rip through. Oh well, I tried. Okay, so I have run out of lasing spot putty. I got down to just the last little bit in this tube here. But I hit all the spots that I need to. This is so smooth that I think just filler is going to take care of that. And besides, you know, I'm going to end up taking most of the stuff anyway, so I think we're good for the time being, and this will be good enough to get us to the filler step. So now just let this dry for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll start sanding it off.
Well, unfortunately, I took the SD card out of my GoPro camera and I had 4 corrupted files. I'm assuming I probably lost about an hour of footage there, but all I did is I sanded down the Bondo with 150 grit sandpaper. The idea here is to take off as much as you can while leaving enough to fill gaps. So you want to sand it enough where you don't go, you know, too deep where you have gaps again, but you don't want to sand it so lightly that you've built up a whole nother coating on top of the helmet. So you can see I sanded down to about the part where you started to see a little bit of blue, that, you know, plastic color shine through, and that was far enough.
All right, so we have our Bondo step done. You can see a little bit of the lines. Actually, here's a really good example right here in this earpiece. I'm not sure if that's focusing or not, but you can see the blue PLL lines, and then you can see, you know, the red color of the Bondo. You can feel a little bit of texture right here, which means, you know, there's still a little bit of a difference here, so I probably just took off a little too much, but these little areas that need to be filled should be taken care of with the filler that we're about to use. So the Bondo got us the deep grooves taken care of, and now we're just going to take care of all the little tiny steps with this. All right, y'all, I cannot believe how crazy good this thing turned out. Like, so it looks so nice. I'm a big fan of this filler. So I'm looking at the dome, and there are just a couple of tiny little places where I might need to just, look at that, just wiping it with my fingers, sand it off these little nubs. Wow, that's amazing. There are just a couple of little spots where I think, like right here, like I'm gonna have to just really lightly sand this to get these little bumps. They're barely noticeable. I could probably skip sanding, I'm not kidding, and just go right into the sandable filler. All right, like this actually needs to be sanded. So this is just gonna need some super light sanding. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna skip the 220, I'm going to go straight to 400 or maybe even 600, and I'm going to do that as a wet sand. Sorry, bumped the camera. And I see a lot of people using like water bottles and sanding and water bottles and sanding. I like to just use a bowl and just go at it and just keep dunking the paper. I think that's just a little more, I don't know, efficient. So let me grab some 400 sandpaper, and away we will go. Now, when it comes to wet sanding, I'm not really I'm not really looking. I'm more listening and feeling. So like this part right here has been wet sanded pretty good. It's nice and smooth and soft. And I haven't even started over here, but I'm hoping the camera will pick this up, but hopefully you can hear the difference. So that's what it sounds like when I first start sanding it, and this is after it's been wet sanded. Hear that? Oh, it's a lot quieter when I'm going over it. It's not really, the grit's really not hitting anything. Just a little difference, but yeah, you can also feel it in the friction, the vibrations. So I'm not really eyeballing anything to see if it's smooth or not. I'm just going off of feeling and sound. Once it sounds smooth, I don't feel like I'm hitting anything, then I just move past that point, because I'm not really looking to take anything off. I'm not looking to knock it back down to PLA or anything. I just want a nice smooth layer on it before I do the black primer, so that I can get it nice and glass smooth for that jet black before I put on that 1K clear coat. But I'll just keep going through this, and then I think I might actually take an extra step and maybe go up to a 6 or an 800 after this. Just a small pass with it. Again, just trying to get this thing glass smooth so that the reflectivity from that chrome paint will look its best. You know, one other little last point, when you are sanding over edges and stuff like that, you have to be super careful, because, you know, if I hit this way, I'm okay, and if I hit it this way, I'm okay, but if I hit this corner, it's really going to cut through that filler too fast, and I'm going to end up with some little PLA lines shown, or not PLA lines, but just I'll see the plastic coming through. So when you go over anything with a hard edge, be careful in that spot. Just sand very lightly. You don't want to cut through that. Okay, so I think it's time for a quick PSA about this filler primer. So I'm not an expert on this, don't trust me, but this is what I remember seeing in some of the like cosplay forums or something. What makes this filler so cool and works so well is that it has red oxide in it, which is like an iron oxide. Which, if I remember right, that's something that you normally spray metal with to prevent it from rusting or oxidizing. So anyway, it's toxic. So if you're sanding on this, you're gonna want to wear a dust mask or something, or, you know, I'm wet sanding, so all of the dust is just going straight down to, you know, my workbench here. But anyway, yeah, this stuff not exactly great for you. So take care of your lungs. Don't let that stuff in. Okay, so I found some 800 grit, which should be just fine. I am getting pretty close to burning through in a couple of places, but it is super smooth. I'm just not going to go over that spot again. And yeah, maybe one more right here too. Almost starting to burn through. You can see a little bit of blue, but again, it looks like there's lines right there, but it's actually super smooth, so I just need to be careful on that spot. So I'm going to give this one more pass with some 800. Okay, so we have wet sanded the red filler primer, and it's just a little bit windy outside, so I'm going to use my little makeshift paint booth here, just using a box fan and a furnace filter. So we're going to give this a shot now with the sandable primer. And yeah, so let's do that. Okay, so our primer is now dry, and I'm looking it over, and I do see just a couple of tiny little places where I can see a little bit of, I guess, layer line, or just some areas where paint isn't flat. So I'm just gonna do some, what is this? 1200 grit sandpaper. Just gonna lightly sand this a little bit, not much, and then we're gonna clear coat it. Okay, so we did our coat of the black primer, waited about 10-15 minutes. The can says to wait 10 minutes and then do a second coat. It is super humid and like 80 some degrees outside, so I waited like 15 minutes thinking maybe that'd help, but anyway. So 2 coats of the black primer, and it's looking nice and smooth. You can see just a little bit of that sheen from the paint. Not really seeing any layer lines or anything like that, so looking pretty good. I think we can go ahead and move into our clear coat. So let's go ahead and get that going. Okay, so I am noticing that it has turned gray. So this black primer is definitely turned into like a storm cloud gray here. I mean, lighter than a charcoal gray. And I'm thinking it's because the clear coat is going to dry super clear, and it's just looking that color right now. So I don't know, I think maybe I'll go ahead and leave the GoPro on for a little bit and see if this turns black over time as it dries. Okay, so I was about to do a second coat of the clear, but you can see this all dried and gave us that jet black, and I don't know if you can see the reflection in the black. Here, let me move the camera real quick. See how well we can see it. I'm just gonna hold it up nice and close. There you go. Look at that. Nice glossy black reflection, and that is all we need before we go into, oh, look at my hand on there. Wow, isn't that crazy? It's like a mirror finish, only on black. So yeah, so this is where you need to get it to. So me and Tim probably did similar steps to get to this product right here, and then now he's going to do the graphite powder, and I'm going to do the Duralumin with my airbrush. But right here, you know, same steps to get to this point, and now we're gonna go airbrush and powder and see what the differences are. Okay, so I'm gonna do the Duralumin now, and you can find this from the Digital Armory on Etsy. I also happen to follow them on Instagram, or if you just search Duralumin on Etsy, you'll find them as well. But I like this stuff because it seems like a good product, and it's more affordable than Aluma-Luster, which is the stuff they actually used on the Mandalorian show. This is, I think it's $20 for this 4-ounce bottle,
And if I remember right, Alumoluster is like $80 for a 4-ounce bottle. So I mean, it's literally a quarter of the price. But so that's what we're gonna spray this with. And I was just looking at. I do this every time. I should really just download this picture. But I go to their Etsy page, and then just go through the photos. There's on the last photo here, it has the instructions on how to spray this stuff. But essentially, you need to use a airbrush or an HLPV touch-up gun. Through an airbrush, use high pressure, 30 psi, and make barely have the. So when you use an airbrush, this is a dual action airbrush. So one action is for air, so that's letting out my 30 psi of air is coming out, right? And then when you pull back on the trigger, that releases the paint. So you go air and then start to release, that pulls the needle back, and that's what lets the paint into the air and it shoots it, right? Quick lesson on airbrushes. But anyway, so when you spray, you can open it all the way up, as in pull the needle completely out of the hole, and that allows the most paint through. But with this stuff, it says to open it 1/18 of the way. So basically as close to not opening it as possible. So I'll just pull back on this. Yeah, way too far. Still too far. All right. So I'm gonna open it about that much when I use it. So it's barely letting any fluid out, just mostly air. But I can lock that in place so I don't accidentally spray too much. So the gun is prepped. Just need to put this in the reservoir and then we'll start painting. Okay, so I have just done one coat of Duralumin on this side of the helmet just to get kind of a before and after. So I got the black and the Duralumin. So you can see my reflection on the black and see my reflection on the Duralumin. Hi. I think I was spraying a little too close on the front here, and there's a couple spots where it's almost kind of splotchy, and I feel like I have to go in and try to hit it a little harder in those spots that I missed. So it was like I was too close here and too close here, and then didn't get enough between the two of them. On the back side, I moved to a new method where I was spraying out I don't know, maybe 8 inches from the helmet, pretty far, and I did these fast sweeping motions, and I just had to assume that there was some paint going on the helmet. I couldn't see any difference doing this, but I would do that, once, and then the second time I went that way. And so anyway, I probably went over this 4 or 5 times, but now I'm looking at it next to the other side, even though it seemed like I wasn't putting anything on. You can definitely see that's black and that's pretty shiny. So yeah, so anyway, I think the farther back and fast motions like that in different angles is probably a good route to go. All right, let's do the rest of it. I feel like this might need a second coat, by the way. In the front, it's looking pretty shiny, pretty bright. So I'm just gonna fix a couple of spots that I need to. On the back side, it still seems a little dark, so I'm just gonna do one more light coat real far away like I did on that before. Well, it turns out one of those corrupted files on my GoPro happened to be the video of me putting the visor in the helmet, but we can just talk through it, not a big deal. So what I have here is a Hobart shield that I got off of Amazon. And when you shop for these, sometimes you'll see different thicknesses. So you might see like 4 mil, 6 mil, 8 mil. But you essentially want to get the thinner one. Makes it a lot easier to work with and a lot easier to cut. But what I did here is I already had a template from doing previous helmets. I just threw the template down, traced it, and then cut it out. But the first time I did this, I just put a piece of paper inside the helmet and took a Sharpie and drew the T shape of the T visor. And then you just keep cutting that down until you get it to fit perfectly inside the helmet. And when you got the shape just right, now you got your template, lay that on the Hobart shield, trace it out, and then cut it out with a strong pair of scissors. So, and then you'll see here in a moment, I'll put a couple of clips on it. And I clipped it so that it was in a circle, and I let it sit for at least a week. You know, I had done the clear coat and all the Duralumin, you know, since this step here, but it had time to kind of shape. It naturally had a curve to it then, so when I put it in the helmet later, it just made it a lot easier to work with, so you didn't have to like try to bend it and force it. But all I did is I did a little bit of hot glue around the edges of the visor on the plastic, and that held it in really good.
There we go. Hey guys, so, gosh, oh man, this turned out, I have to admit, I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out. The whole idea of this project was to make a Mandalorian helmet on a budget, right? If I just went to the store, got some cans off the shelf, and then either finished it with graphite rub or, you know, something fancier, you know, how could we just do this as like a budget build? And for what we ended up with, I mean, I'm satisfied, and I hope you are too, because every second, every minute, every hour, every month that I put into making this, I did with love for you. This is a giveaway helmet. I wanted to make something very special because I know it's going to make one of you guys very happy. So, hey, thank you for joining me on another make, and let me just say, Dark Rage, better bring your A game, man. I can't wait to send this off to someone and have someone, I don't want to say judge it because, you know, we're calling this kind of a loose comparison, not a contest, but yeah, dude, it turned out awesome. But hey guys, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate all the time. I know this video probably made it 40 minutes more at this point. It's probably the longest video I'll ever make, but for all of you that made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. Hey, may the force be with y'all, and we'll catch you in the next video.